Thank you for tuning in to All Things Real Estate. Once again, here are your hosts, Brad Avergon and Gary Kelley.
We're back for the second half of All Things Real Estate. You know, we are on WCRN, we are on WMCT, we are on Facebook. We're just, it's like stuff in a fan. We're everywhere.
You're omnipresent.
Yeah, omnipresent. So Brad, we were finishing out the first half of the show, and you were talking about a financial litmus test that you put your clients and your children in particular through.
Yes, I put my children through a lot of things, but in the
Yeah,
financial sense, but in the financial sense, one of the things, and you brought up a great point, Gary, which is, a lot of loan officers, they'll just, they'll come in, they'll say, what do you want to, we want to buy a house. Okay, what do you want to get pre-approved? And they'll pre-approve you for a lot more than you should spend. I tend to ask a lot of questions, as I'm sure won't surprise you, digging a little bit deeper, trying to find out, to make sure that if there's going to be a cash flow change or anything, to make sure that the clients are going to be okay long run. For me, it's all about the relationship with the client for the long haul. I want to make sure people are making good decisions. They're going to feel okay in the property, that the property isn't going to be a problem for them down the road. So one of the things that I do is we talk about, number one, what are they looking for? What price point do they have one in mind? And if they don't, we kind of work backwards from there. And I'll say, well, have you been paying rent? What have you been paying for rent? Because one of the things I look at is something called payment shock, which is the difference between what they're paying for rent now and what they're going to be paying. And if it's too big, I want to address that. How is this going to change your cash flow? Are you able to put money aside now every month? How is that going to work? That's the first thing. The second thing is I'll talk about projected monthly payment. After we've come up with a hypothetical price point for them, and we've come up with what the mortgage principal and interest, taxes, and insurance are. And I'll go so far as to jump into a town that they think they might want to live in, pull up a house around that price point, grab the taxes off of something that's on the market right now, and pop in an insurance figure and figure that out. After I do that, I say, okay, let's just say the monthly payment, including taxes and insurance, principal and interest, is going to be $3,500, and they've been paying $2,000 per month. I'll say, here's what I want you to do while you're looking for a house going forward. I want you to write a check every month for $3,500 from your account and put it into a savings account, just like you're paying that. Or if they're paying rent currently, I'll say, okay, pick up the difference. So if they're paying $2,000 a month rent, then they have to continue doing that. I'll say, write an extra check for $1,500 and put it into savings. So I said, because I want you to get used to making that monthly payment and give me feedback. If it's too high, if you're really feeling strained or stressed, let's talk about that and see if we can work it down a little bit. If it feels great, that's great practice, getting into that routine and putting that money aside. And if folks are living with their parents, they get tired of living in their parents' basement. One of the great things that parents can do is put them through that exercise. They can say, okay, write a check. If you're the parents, write a check to me for $3,500 a month rent. I'll put it aside for you. And when it comes time for you to buy a home, I will gift that money back to you. So there's all sorts of different ways, or I'll give it back to you. You lent it to me at $3,500 a month. I will give you your loan back. There's also ways you can structure that.
I suspect that it's easier for you to have that discussion with another person than it is for you to have that discussion with your kids.
Well, you know what?
Not your kids, by the way, not your kids at all, but if for some reason there's a month where they're a little bit shy, it's better to find that out when the stakes are, very low than and certainly not to have to go back and say, Dad, I can't make it this month. And then that's going to unleash a lecture.
That's right. But you know what? I will tell you something. One of the greatest fear, because I talk to parents too. Parents, my dad especially if they're getting a gift, my dad wants to talk to you, my mom wants to talk to you. They want to make sure we're not getting in over our head. And so one of the things that I'll say is, you know what, if you set this up with your parents, or if I'm talking to the parents, if you set this up, better to know now before you've made that commitment. And it gives the parents, if the kids are able to make that monthly payment, it gives the parents confidence and security to know that the kids have been able to make that payments while they've been doing their home search. Maybe it's taking 2 months, maybe it's taking 3 months, but in that time they haven't had a problem and they're still able to put a little bit of money aside for savings, because it's not supposed to be, in the example we use, the $3,500, and they don't have any money left to buy coffee on the way to work. That's not the goal. The goal is you're spending your 3,500. This is your housing payment. You need to have some money left over, either for savings or for expenses, car expenses, gas, whatever it is. So it's a great exercise.
You talk about parents. I remember distinctly a client who lives in Grafton now, but at the time they were the husband was in the military and was away. She was buying the house while he was away, which, I thought was kind of a bold, they obviously had trust between each other, but we were looking at houses that I would consider to be, borderline distressed. They were rough. And I remember one time her dad came, her dad comes up to me and says, frankly, as dads would do, why are you showing her this fill in the blank? You can imagine words that he might have put in there. And I looked at him and I said, because it's all they can afford. They need some help. He looked at me. I looked at him. A week later, there was some additional funding that was brought to the table, and they got into a wonderful house in Grafton. But that's what happens sometimes, is especially with first-time buyers, they often need some help. And they want to do everything on their own. They want to be independent. They want to hear, they want to roar and all that. But at the end of the day, if parents are both in a position to help, and conversely, if their relationship with the kids and stuff is such that they can help, that's often needed. And it's a difficult discussion to have, because in my case, at least, I'm not dealing with the parents. They're not my client. My client is the people buying, the people buying the house.
Right. And I do think, though, that and probably it's easier because of the nature. What I do is it's all numbers to me. It's all numbers. That's all I really deal with. And so to discuss numbers, in this case with the kids or first-time home buyers, and to have those conversations without judgment. And that's another part too. Sometimes when kids will talk to their parents, they feel, oh, they're judging me, or they're looking at me as their little kid. That's not the conversation that we're having. We're equals. I'm not talking to them as a parent to a child. I'm talking to them as their advisor and say, I want to make sure you have all of the information that you need so you can make a good decision and you feel good about that. If they want the parents to get involved at that point, it's a matter of saying, okay, what do you want me to tell your parents? What are you comfortable with me sharing with them? And then they can have those conversations, because at the end of the day, parents love their children, right? They want their children to be able to succeed.
Sometimes.
They want their children to what'd you say?
Sometimes
They want their children to succeed. They want their children to fly on their own, and their kids do want to fly on their own. But as you said, sometimes they need a little help. And if you can set it up so it's a winning strategy where the parents feel really good about what the kids are doing, and the kids feel really good about, the help that they've gotten from the parents, and that it helped them, it can be a really a perfect solution, which is really what you go for.
That's true. I did want to shift gears a little bit, and this may be an abrupt shift, but I wanted to get this in before the end of the show and talk about, in this marketplace, what are sellers having to do differently?
Well, that's really interesting, Gary. I mean, I'll let you address the pricing aspect, but I can tell you that certainly from an appraisal aspect, when an appraisal's done, they look at, in the last 6 months, in the last 1 to 2 mile radius, what's a similar home sold for, but they also look at what a similar home is on the market for. And that's a little bit of a change. It wasn't, 6 months ago, things were just flying off the shelf at high dollar volume, so forth and so on. But now that aspect, because the market shifted just a little bit, is really, really important. And so I think that sellers really need to be advised professionally by someone like yourself, because the market has changed, number one. And number two, you can't point back and say, well, listen, my buddy 3 doors down sold his house this time last year, and he got X dollars. In my world, that's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because the appraisers have to judge the market based on what that house is worth today, not what it was worth last year. Now, from a
But see,
pricing standpoint, how do you
that's
do
the
it?
big thing with sellers is they know that the house down the street sold in 3 days for 100,000 over asking with a $400,000 asking price. Okay. And we're going in and we're saying, yeah, your house is probably worth in this market 450. And they're like, what do you mean? That's less than the guy down the street. Well, there's been some shifts. The biggest shift we've seen is because of the interest rate shift. Interest rates have trickled up, and that's put, I'm going to say folks have tapped the brakes a little bit, but it's not the wild, wild west where it was, just a few months ago. It has definitely slowed down, and our task is to make sure we're open and honest with our clients about that. We're completely transparent, but to also say it's a different market. You're not going to have a line of people down the street at the open house. Okay. We're not going to call the police for crowd control, which was done. Yeah. We're gonna enter into this, and you used a term earlier. I don't remember what it was now, but I call it a more balanced market. Mm-hmm. Things are
I'm sorry, Gary, didn't mean to cut you off, but I had a question. The other thing that wasn't there a year ago that I think is there now, but you tell me, is a year ago, a seller could take a certain amount of risk. They could put their property on the market. Things were so crazy and things were going over that you really didn't have to worry too much about a property getting stale, missing that mark, so to speak. Versus now, if they overshoot the market, if they price their house too high and that house sits for 30 days or 60 days, doesn't the connotation that property's a little stale and people start to question, why isn't that house selling?
That's exactly right. If we look at something and we look at a house that's sitting there for 60 days, we clearly believe it's overpriced, whether it is or not. That's the perception that we're taking from looking at the numbers and what's going on in the marketplace. We're actually telling our sellers to often go in lower than you might reasonably expect. But then as offers come in, we can work them up and create a bit of I'm not going to say an auction, but a bit of a marketplace that way where people are making offers on a house. There's solid offers and everything else. One of the things that we still worry about is, will the house appraise? If people come in and they say, I'm going to offer $500,000 over the $500,000 asking. Well, yeah, okay. The bank's probably not going to give you that money. And then we get into, well, if you're going to waive the appraisal contingency or the mortgage contingency, there's a bunch of different things that come into it that way. But I'm beginning to drone on and we're out of time. So, Brad, if someone wants to reach you, how would they do that?
The best way to reach me, Gary, is via my cell phone, which is 978-375-5531, or they can reach me at brad@bradavergon.com. And Gary, how do they reach you?
I can be reached at 508-733-6005, and I'm Gary at Move with Gary. And for the remainder of this show, Brad, we're going to refer to you as Crash. Where is the crash?
It ain't coming, my friend. It ain't coming. Not any.
All right. All right, Brad. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Once again, thank you for watching All Things Real Estate. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Brad or Gary.